Imagine yourself transported, not to the forum, gleaming with marble, but to the shadows just beyond its splendor. In the Roman world, there was no single experience of slavery. It was a condition that encompassed scholars, doctors, miners, cooks, and field laborers. But for all, it began with a profound loss of self. Your life, your body, your skill soul are now property, an asset to be deployed for the profit and comfort of your dominus, your master. The law is clear. You are a tool, a service, valued only for your function. Consider the experience of the slaves whose lives were spent far from the urban centers, in the vast Roman mines. Imagine descending into the darkness of a Spanish silver mine, or a quarry in Egypt. The air immediately turns thick and heavy. The only light comes from the sputtering oil lamps you carry, casting, fleeting, dancing shadows on the rough-hewn rock walls. The soundscape here is one of relentless, dull percussion, the metallic thunk of pickaxes, the slow dragging sound of ore-filled baskets, the constant drip of grunt. Here, in the heat and the dark, the sun is a distant, unreal memory. Your muscles ache with a deep, persistent throb. Your diet is meager, perhaps coarse bread and watery, when just enough to fuel the continuous, back-breaking labor. The threat of cavern is ever present, but the most immediate danger is the overseer, the vilikas, whose voice is a constant, harsh presence, and whose whip is the final word. Many miners were chained to the rock face, a brutal measure to prevent escape and to enforce the ceaseless rhythm of production. For these individuals, life was a slow, deliberate erosion of body and spirit. Now, shift your imagination from the rock face to the smoky heat of a massive urban bakery in the city of Rome itself. You are a servus pastoris, a baker's slave, working alongside dozens of others. The air here is thick with flour dust and the heavy, sweet-sour scent of fermenting dough. Your task is to turn the enormous millstones that grind the grain. This is not a quick process. Hour after hour, your shoulder presses into the yoke. Walk in the same slow, punishing circle. The sound is a monotonous, grating shikrush of stone against grain. It is repetitive, exhausting, and leaves you permanently covered in a fine white powder that clings to your skin and lungs. Yet, even in this system of control, a fragile hope could persist. The Romans understood that incentives, however cruel, could be more effective than pure terror. This is where the peculium comes into focus. A peculium was a small fund, sometimes money, sometimes property, which a slave was permitted to possess and manage, even though, legally, it still belonged to the master. This small allowance, earned through extra work, or the master's grace, became the lifeline. It was the potential seed of freedom. You might save coin by managing a small side business, perhaps running errands or selling minor goods. Every saved sestertius was a step closer to manumission, the act of buying your own freedom. The journey toward manumission could take a lifetime, often requiring the slave to be middle-aged and their master to be in need of a large sum of money. But for many, the peculium was the mental anchor, the quiet, persistent promise of a day when the millstone might stop turning for good. Daily life was a perpetual balancing act. You learned quickly to gauge your master's mood, to anticipate orders, and to form quiet, necessary bonds with your fellow slaves. These informal communis da contubernium vere detroit, unwritten rules of Roman slavery, offering necessary support and solidarity against the harshness of the Roman system. This rhythm of labor, threat, and quiet hope defined the existence of millions. They were the engine of the empire, laboring in silence and shadow. But sometimes, the weight of the chains became too heavy to bear. Sometimes, the spirit of rebellion took hold, leading to a massive, terrifying confrontation that shook the very foundations of the Republic. This brings us to the story of a man who dared to challenge the might of Rome itself. The story of Spartacus is not merely a tale of a runaway slave. It is a profound testament to the human spirit's refusal to be wholly broken, and a stark reminder of the immense scale of the Roman slave population. His rebellion, known to history as the Third Servile War, was not a minor uprising, but a conflict that demanded the full, fearful attention of the mighty Roman Republic. Spartacus began his life. It is believed as a Thracian auxiliary soldier serving in the Roman army. He was a man of skill, discipline, and natural military acumen. For reasons lost to time, he was enslaved and eventually funneled into the world of the gladiatorial schools. The ludus, specifically one owned by Lentulus Patetes in the city of Capua. Imagine the atmosphere of the ludus, a specialized prison where men, trained to kill for sport, were kept under lock and key. It was a place of enforced fraternity and constant physical hardship. Yet, It was this harsh training that forged the core of his future army. In 73 BC, Spartacus, along with around 70 fellow gladiators, initiated their desperate break for freedom. Their makeshift weapons, initially kitchen knives and implements stolen from the school, were quickly upgraded. Their escape began with a barricade using stolen wagons and the bodies of fallen guards. The initial success was small, but the magnetic quality of Spartacus was enormous. He offered a simple, compelling vision to the disillusioned rural slaves of Campania: freedom, dignity, and a chance to return home. The promise resonated deeply as the small group of gladiators moved across the countryside. Their numbers swelled rapidly, first into hundreds, then into thousands, drawing in field slaves and domestic servants, anyone who found the yoke of Roman servitude intolerable. The Roman Senate, viewing this as a provincial nuisance rather than a war, initially dispatched only small, inadequate forces, often commanded by ISLI-defeated priests. These early Roman defeats were catastrophic for the Republic's morale, but they were a boon for Spartacus. With each victory, his army acquired more weapons, armor, and supplies, transforming into a formidable, disciplined fighting force. Spartacus demonstrated extraordinary tactical brilliance. He was not merely a runaway. He was a true military leader. One famous incident saw the Roman commander, Claudius Glaber, trap the rebels on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius. The only route down was guarded, but Spartacus ordered his men to weave ropes and ladders from wild vines growing on the slopes and descend the unguarded cliff face, circling back to surprise and utterly rout the Roman force. At its peak, the slave army under Spartacus is estimated to have numbered perhaps 70,000 to 120,000 men, women, and children. They were a force of astonishing size, but they were also hampered by internal division. Spartacus aimed to lead his people north, over the Alps and out of Roman territory, allowing them to disperse to their homelands. However, a large contingent of Gauls and Germans, led by Crixus, preferred to stay south to loot and fight. This disagreement ultimately fractured the movement. As the rebellion grew and shifted into southern Italy, the Senate finally recognized the true danger. They assigned the massive task of crushing the revolt to Marcus Licinius, the wealthiest man in Rome, who was granted an unprecedented 6 legions. Crassus was merciless and methodical. He restored discipline through the brutal Roman tradition of decimation, executing 1 in every 10 soldiers in his legions who had previously shown cowardice. Crassus cornered Spartacus in the southernmost tip of Italy. The rebel leader attempted to cross to Sicily, but his deal with Sicilian pirates was betrayed. Crassus then built a massive defensive ditch and rampart, 55 kilometers long, cutting the entire peninsula in two, sealing Spartacus off. The final, desperate confrontation came in 71 BC. Spartacus led a frantic charge against Crassus's lines. The details of the final battle are grim, reflecting the brutality of ancient warfare, but we can focus on the consequences. The historians tell us that Spartacus fought with the courage of a true general, attempting to reach Crassus himself before finally falling, surrounded by the enemy. His body was never definitively found. The Roman response to the crushing of the revolt was a horrifying display designed to extinguish any future hope of rebellion. Along the Appian Way, the road from Capua to Rome, Crassus crucified 6,000 captured rebels. This was a public, agonizing, and inescapable tableau of Sophoringa Scylla, chilling warning to anyone who dared to challenge the Roman hierarchy. The legacy of Spartacus remains potent. His revolt, though ultimately doomed, revealed the deep-seated instability inherent in a society built upon human chattel, and showed that the weakest members of the Republic could, for a time, wield immense power. The great wars and struggles of the Republic, however, often distracted from the quieter elements of Roman life: the rituals, the hidden beliefs, and the secret societies that flourished beneath the surface of the grand architecture. Our next segment takes us away from the open battlefield and down into the shadows, to a subterranean mystery that defined the spiritual lives of many Romans, including soldiers and slaves alike. From the high drama of military campaigns, we descend now into the quiet, often overlooked corners of Roman spirituality. Beneath the bustling cities and military camps of the empire, a secret religion flourished, one whose customs and temples evoke an atmosphere of profound mystery and devotion. This was the cult of Myth. The core of this cult remains a puzzle to modern historians, originating perhaps in Persia, or perhaps created within the Roman world itself as a kind of pseudo-oriental mystery cult. It spread rapidly, primarily through the legions and among merchants and slaves. These weren't grand public temples like the Pantheon. Instead, Mithras was worshipped in small, subterranean shrines known as Myth. Imagine descending a narrow, steep flight of steps, leaving the noise and light of the Roman street far above you. The air in the Mithraeum is cool, damp, and thick, with a faint scent of incense. The layout of these temples is consistently uniform, designed to evoke a cave or grotto. The space is long and narrow, with raised platforms or podia running along the sides, where initiates recline for ritual meals. At the far end, the focal point of the temple, stands the central image. The Toractani is the iconic representation of Mithra. It depicts the god, usually dressed in Phrygian cap and trousers, slaying a sacred bull. But this image is complex and rich in symbolic details. The bull's tail ends in ears of grain. A scorpion attacks the bull's testicles. A dog laps at the blood, and a snake attempts to consume the life-giving fluid. Above, sometimes, appear the sun and moon, or the 12 signs of the zodiac. The rituals conducted within these dim chambers were known only to the initiates. Mithraism was a mystery cult, meaning its central truths were revealed through a gradual, secretive process of initiation. There were 7 distinct grades, or levels, that a worshipper could achieve: Corax Rabene, Nymphus, Bridagru, Eme Mail Solder, Leah Lion, Persis Persian, Heliodroma Sunrona, and finally, Potterfather, the leader of the congregation. Each grade involved complex rites, tests, and symbolic dress, guiding the initiate through a cosmic, astrological journey. For the Roman soldier, far from home and facing the arbitrary harshness of military life, the structure, the fraternity, and the promise of cosmic purpose offered by Mithraism were immensely attractive. It offered a sense of belonging and a structured spiritual ascent that the traditional Roman state religion often lacked. Significantly, Mithraism was almost exclusively a religion for men. This exclusion of women is one of its most defining features, and often meant that the cult remained particularly strong within barracks and trading communities. Archaeology is our primary window into this hidden world, since these temples were deliberately built underground or in cellars. Many were abandoned or carefully filled in, preserving their structure and content surprisingly well. Discoveries have been made across the entire empire, from Britain to Syria, revealing altars, small statues, and the debris of ritual meals, often bones of small birds and cups used for wine. The very atmosphere of the Mithraeum is designed for contemplation and quiet devotion. It is a place of psychological descent, intended to shut out the clamor of the Roman world and focus the mind on the celestial, structured struggle represented in the darkness and the fixed gaze of the reclining worshippers. Perhaps consuming the sacred bread and wine created a powerful, shared experience. This quiet, hidden life of ritual and belief stood in stark contrast to the highly visible, public, and often extravagant lives led by Rome's ruling class. The vast majority of the Roman world lived in the shadows or the fields, but a powerful minority commanded unimaginable luxury, sustained entirely by the systems we have explored. This elite class, whose every need was met by slave labor, and whose days were filled with opulence and social maneuvering, is the focus of our final segment. We now ascend from the subterranean depths of the Mithraeum and the hardship of the slave's labor to the gilded, open-air world of the Roman elite. The lives of the senatorial and equestrian classes existed in a state of opulence and intricate social engineering that stands in stark contrast to the daily grind of the common Roman. Imagine the dumas of a wealthy patricius, a Roman senator, perhaps in the city or nestled on a sunny hillside in Campania. The house itself is a fortress of comfort, often centered around a courtyard, the atrium, with a pool, the impluvium, catching rainwater. Every function of daily life is delegated. You, as the head of the household, never lift a finger for labor. Your only true work is political and social. The morning begins, not with toil, but with the salutatio, the ritual calling hour. As the patroness, or patron, you receive a stream of clients or citizens, freedmen, and often groups of your own slaves who arrive to pay their respects, seek favors, and demonstrate loyalty. This is the mechanism by which your influence is measured, and it is a necessary ritual to maintain your standing in the highly competitive political world. The centerpiece of the elite Roman day was often the elaborate bathing ritual. The public baths, or thermae, were monumental structures, but the wealthiest Romans often had private bathing suites in their homes. Imagine the sensation of moving through the different rooms. The cool, calm frigidarium, the warm, gentle and the steamy, intense heat of the caldarium. This was not simply hygiene, it was a deeply ingrained social custom, a place for business, gossip, and networking, all performed in a slow, languid rhythm. But the true display of wealth and status was the cena, or the main dinner, held in the evening. This was far more than a meal. It was a carefully choreographed social performance. Imagine reclining on a curved couch, the triclinium, one of only 3, allowing 9 guests in total. The room is softly lit by oil lamps, and the air is fragrant with exotic spices and perfumes. The food itself was a show of excess and global reach. Courses could be astonishingly elaborate. Exotic birds, rare fish, and dishes designed to shock and impress. But the luxury was not just in the food, it was in the service. Highly trained slaves, often Greek or Oriental, moved silently through the room, anticipating every need. One slave might carve the meat with dramatic flair. Another might recite poetry or philosophies to entertain the guests. The entire evening was a subtle, yet powerful, assertion of the master's unlimited power and resources. To maintain this extravagant lifestyle, the elite relied utterly on the skills of their slave workforce. Beyond the laborers in the mines and fields, a domestic slave was a mark of honor and wealth. Slaves ran businesses, managed libraries, tutored children, served as accountants, and acted as highly skilled personal assistants. A senator's wealth was not just in land or money, but in the number and quality of his servi. The contrast between this life of effortless luxury and the brutal reality of the slave's existence, which we discussed in our first segment, is the central tension of the Roman Empire. The tranquility of the villa garden, with its gentle fountains and cool air, was purchased at the expense of the ceaseless, painful toil of the many. The rhythm of their lives, while filled with luxury, was also deeply constrained by social expectation and political necessity. A misstep, una salutatio and an insult at a cena, or a perceived lack of generosity, could lead to social or political ruin. It was a golden cage, built upon the silent suffering of those who had no cage at all.